Good morning and welcome to the Hurrdat Sports Show live from Summit League Media Day. I'm Anna Bellinghausen. This is Avarie Howard and Missy Hydrick. Guys, thanks so much for joining me this morning.
Yeah. All and looking forward to talking all things Summit League basketball.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. What a cool event.
Absolutely. The first time they've ever done it at the Denny Sanford Premier Center. How much excitement has brought into this event just for the first time and putting it on the stage?
Well, I think it's a really great way for this league to think about elevating basketball as a whole for both their men's and their women's program. It is a focus of the Summit League. They look at how this is an opportunity for them, kind of the front porch of all of their institutions. A lot of it is basketball. That's where people resonate. So when you can do this, it not only gives great exposure to the programs, but you're going to hear from student athletes, you're going to hear from coaches, you're going to get more of an in-depth opportunity. And I think they get to share their stories too. That doesn't happen all over the place. And I think that's the exciting part about today.
Yeah, the level of talent is climbing in this conference, and I'm excited that there's a network also here to showcase that as well. But when you look at some of the household names of Summit League, whether it be Oral Roberts on the men's side and South Dakota State on the women's side, they're recognized across the nation, especially being in those NCAA tournaments. And I think the talent and just the recognizability of this conference is growing. To have an event like this to really kick things off, let these athletes know that we see them and they're important too. And this is just a really cool way to start the season.
Yeah, definitely a special day. We'll be here all day from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Hurrdat Sports. Also, you can catch us on the League Network wherever you're joining us from. So we'll have all 9 teams come up on the stage, including a special guest too at the end. Omaha men's basketball will also join us. Of course, you got to give love to the Omaha side too, being Hurrdat Sports in Omaha. But we'll have all 9 women's basketball teams here. First, starting with the coach and then a player. Guys, I want to talk about those preseason polls too, just released this morning at 9 a.m. Running through that list quickly: South Dakota State at number 1, then North Dakota State, South Dakota State at 3, South Dakota at number 3, and then North Dakota at 4. With those top 4 teams, anyone stand out particularly to you, Missy?
Well, I think it's really interesting when you look at this league as a whole and you go back a year ago and you think about what South Dakota State was able to do. I mean, they had one of the longest winning streaks in the entire nation once they hit the NCAA tournament. They ran off 22 in a row. They were undefeated in the regular season in this league, and then they won the conference tournament right here on this floor. The biggest factor is their lineup looks different coming into this season, but I think you also have to give credit. A lot of what we see in preseason rankings is sometimes what people look at on paper, and it's very different when you put it out on the floor. There's going to be challenges for all of these teams. I think North Dakota State is also incredibly intriguing. They've got 2 players that have landed on the preseason first team all summer. And I think that's heavyweight out front. And we're going to talk about those young ladies later on this morning and this afternoon. But for me, I like South Dakota. I think this is kind of a sleeper team in a sense, simply because they're finally healthy. They lost so many players a year ago to injuries. They were very depleted. But I think when you think about what Kayla Karius wants to do in terms of getting up and down the floor, more weapons at her disposal, I'm very interested to see how year 2 goes for her in Vermilion.
Yeah, you kind of touched on North Dakota. Is really interesting to me. They had a great year last year, most wins in the Division I era for this team. They went from 3rd and last in scoring 2 years ago to 4th top scoring in the conference last year. So a lot of improvement to be number 2 going into the season. A lot of respect on what last year was and wasn't maybe just a one-time fluke. So really excited to see, especially like you said, those 2 players we'll talk about later this afternoon, but just see if they can stay at that level. Can they hold that consistency? And also just kind of sometimes fun to see new names rise to the top in this conference.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the rest of the half of the league. So in the number 5 spot, Oral Roberts, number 6, Omaha, Denver at 7, St. Thomas at 8, and then number 9 is Kansas City to round out that list.
Well, I think it's ultimately going to look at the balance of what this league has been about. And you saw that last year, is that you kind of have to take South Dakota State and what they did a season ago, maybe out of the mix, and think about how difficult it was for these teams to go on the road and get wins, but also to have teams be able to steal ones. And that's what you have to look to do. We have to remember in this mid-major universe that's what the Summit League is that these are teams and you're looking at a 1-bid opportunity. Thinking about March and March Madness and the big dance. How do we get there? Well, it's a 1-bid league. Therefore, you got to kind of put your season into segments. non-conference, it's your regular season conference, and then it's the postseason tournament. The goal always is to have people peaking at the right time. We saw that a year ago. We saw some teams play very well here in this building, and that gives you, I think, more of the balance of what this league brings and a lot of talent from top to bottom. There's great coaches, great talent. That's what's going to be on display. That's what we're going to be talking about today, but you're going to see it from November through March.
Yeah, the bottom half is also interesting because you have a lot of coaches that are newer, even some coaches that have had a great coaching career like in St. Thomas, but they're newer to this conference, newest to their league. So they're getting comfortable, but we don't want to get ahead of ourselves. We'll talk to Kansas City soon, but a lot of turnover there, how they prove themselves in another year under their new head coach, just a lot of growth from a lot of the teams at the bottom. So I think there's a lot of room for improvement. I think we'll see a lot of talent show up. We'll see a lot of coaches get comfortable within this conference. So these are teams you still have to keep your eye on as well.
Right. So we're looking at these preseason polls, but it's funny because last season Omaha was picked dead last in this league at number 10, and they go all the way to the championship final, right? So how much pressure, how much expectation do you put on these preseason polls? Let's say maybe in your spot where you don't want to be, or you are on spot. How much pressure is that just as a former player, Missy?
Well, I think there's pressure to it, but it's also the expectation. And I think every coach will come through here today and every player would say, our expectation is to be in the upper half of this league. That's our goal. We want to win a Summit League championship, whether it's regular season and or in the tournament. But ultimately, it can be a motivator. You know, you've got a team like Kansas City, or maybe you're thinking Omaha, pick 6 and being like, you know what, we can finish a lot higher than that. We know we have the tools here. We've put together a roster. They're gelling at the right time. So it can be a motivator for players and for coaches. But I think sometimes polls are a hard thing to put stock into, as is a top 25 preview. I think sometimes we should be looking at top 25 polls on the national level. Don't give me a poll now. Give me a poll maybe like after the second or third week of the season, because that's when people kind of start to figure out who they are. You don't know a lot about these teams yet. We can say you've got a top 15 your entire roster back and 75% of scoring and rebounding, but that might not necessarily be the case. It might not work yet. And so we've got to kind of take these with a grain of salt, but understand what you're looking at is a lot of talent and a lot of really good teams that I think can make hay in this on the national scale and in the Summit League over the course of the season.
Yeah, and I think that's a great being based in Omaha. So much of our focus is on Omaha women's basketball, but you get time to watch other teams come through there and compete. And every single game, there's no game on the schedule. It's like, well, that's a win or that's an immediate loss. Every game is competitive. And there's a lot of times where teams at the top are challenged from those teams that are preseason picked at the bottom. And you look at the past few years in that postseason tournament, how many upsets have there been in the first round, the second round? Like, last seeded Omaha plays South Dakota State again in the final. So Omaha has back-to-back tournament final appearances. So there's really, I think you take it with a grain of salt, you use it as a motivator, but if you're a South Dakota State, even a North Dakota State, knowing that you're a top dog, you have to play that, there's a target on your back at all times.
Well, I think you have to keep in mind too, when you look at the talent of this league and we start talking about the student athletes, and we're going to meet a lot of these young ladies today, 6 of the top 10 scorers from a year ago return this season, including the top 4 scorers in this league. You've got 4 of the top 10 rebounders from a year ago back, 7 of the top 10 distributors from a year ago, including the top 4. So this is a league that is heavy at the top with a lot of talent. Now, these are older rosters, and we can talk about the portal and we can talk about how that all makes a difference and extra years and all of that. But older teams, veteran teams, leadership counts for a lot. And when you can put that together with talent that comes back, that makes for very, very good teams and great matchups throughout the season.
Well, guys, this is already getting me excited for all the basketball. We'll take a quick break here from the Hurrdat Sports Show. We'll be right back with you once again for the Kansas City Brews. Welcome back into the Hurrdat Sports Show live from Summit League Media Day. We're now joined by second-year head coach Deanna Jackson-Durrett of Kansas City. Coach, I have to know, first of all, what's the excitement level down in KC?
Oh, we're excited. We are beyond excited. We have a fresh new team and more experience on the staff, so if nobody's excited. So it's been fun. Like the last couple months have been a lot of fun.
You add a lot of turnover to this roster this year. When you're out and recruiting and looking for what you want this Kansas City identity to be, what are you looking for in those players?
Well, first, I don't like to call it turnover. I like to call it upgrading.
There you go.
Yeah, I like it.
We were just looking for more competitive personalities to be in this league, to play people like South Dakota State, South Dakota, North Dakota State. Like, you have to be competitive night in and night out. And a lot of times you want to look for that in recruiting. And so that was the goal. The goal was to get players more like me. Like, I'm competitive. Like, I want to win. Like, I hate to lose at everything. And so I needed that fire. And so when we went about, recruiting, we had recruited a lot of them all year, but, spots opened up. And so we could recruit more. We could get more of them. And, that was really the plan.
When you think back to the run that you had here, you advanced to the semifinals, you guys beat Denver, you beat North Dakota State. It was with a very depleted roster, obviously. But what kind of momentum does that give you then in those conversations you're having with recruits and thinking, all right, this is step one, this is where we want to go moving forward?
I think I was so happy for those 7 that we had.
Yeah.
To just end the season on a positive note.
Yeah.
Right. And then you just tell the recruits, like, this is what the future looks like. Like, that's the kind of competitive nature that we have to have. We came into this with 7 people. All you could do was compete.
Yeah.
And, you talk about that in recruiting. You talk about, like, just this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what we need for it to look like every time in practice, every time you walk in the classroom. Like, I want you to have that competitive feeling.
I know one of the biggest things, and I have this conversation with a lot of coaches who go from that assistant chair over to the main chair. Buck stops with you, right? So that's where it is. So when you look at year one and go back and think, okay, what did you learn maybe about yourself, about the entire process? Did you make some changes? I know you made some changes to your staff, and obviously you look at your recruiting, but just in totality of your first year, what do you take from that?
How long do you have? Because, man, what I learned was a lot more about me, being in those situations. And, you have these ideas when you're an assistant coach, like, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to do that. Like, you make a list, right? Like, you're writing down, like, I love this head coach. I love my boss, but I'll never do that. Right. And so you think when you get a job, like, boom, boom, like, I'm going to implement this, but it does not go that way whatsoever. And I learned, about myself is that, like, I have to have patience with the process. It's funny because you tell players that, right?
Yes.
Like, it's a process, have patience, and enjoy the journey. And last year, like, it went so fast. Like, I couldn't really enjoy anything. And I don't know. I just learned how to just, like, sit back and just look at everything in totality. Like, don't, it's not the end of the world that this happened. It's not the end of the world that happened. But how are you going to change? How are you going to do that differently? And it was a lot of me looking in the mirror, like, how are you going to be different? How are you going to approach your players differently? What are you going to give to them? How much energy are you going to give to them? And we just invested so much time in this group, and that now, like, I'm learning that you have to continue that. Like, it never stops. Like, you're recruiting the players that you have, especially with the portal. Like, you are recruiting those players every day, and I just wanted to be authentically me. And I wanted to give that to them, because the first thing I learned in recruiting is that you have to be honest. And especially with them thinking that they have so many other options, like, be honest. Tell them what it is. This is what it's going to be about. And then you can move forward easier. And so, I mean, I learned a lot. Like, 6 inches over is like, it's like the Grand Canyon.
Yes.
It is the Grand Canyon. But I love it. Like, I still feel like I was made for this. So,
well, I'm sure your boss is glad to hear that too. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. As you reflect back on, you've been in those players' shoes before. You know, you had time in the WNBA and now also coaching experience in the Big 12. Now, as a head coach, how much of that do you reflect on those moments to help you through that growing process and now having the first year on your belt?
I use it a lot. I think more so in my head, as you know, I can remember a time when my coach said exactly this to me, right? Or I can remember feeling this way and my coach said this, so maybe I need to say that to them. So a lot of times, I mean, it was an instance when I was a sophomore, like I was going to my sophomore year at Oklahoma, and Coach Cole wanted me to do and be and lead this team, and I what? Like, that's not for me. And I kept using the term like, that's not me. That's not me. And she looked at me, and I will never forget this. And this changed my like just the path that I was taking at Oklahoma. She looked at me and she said, "You are so selfish." And nobody, I don't care what they say, nobody wants to hear that they are selfish. Right. But I wasn't giving all of me to Oklahoma, the program. Right. And so, you know, I take those experiences and I give them to my players, and it's hard to be vulnerable, right? But I am, and I tell them about that. Like, I was being selfish at that time. Like, I don't want to see you go down that same route. And so I use it all the time. Like, I do, you know, but I think you have to. And that's what they get when they come and they play for me. Like, you're getting that experience, right?
Coach, you bring in newcomers, and then we touched on only 3 returning student athletes. How do you find ways to gel this team together and just bond them, maybe even outside of the basketball arena?
So, you guys, this 12 that came in, plus our 3, they took it upon themselves. And when you have that, when you have a bunch of new people that's like, we're going to bond. Like, you come into my house, I'm cooking for you. Like, that's what we had. So really, they made my job a lot easier because, you know, my staff and I have to find a way to like make it mesh, right? But they did the easy part. They did the hard part. They said, we're going to come together and we're going to love each other outside of this. So they established that, and you see it like they're in the offices all the time. They have a different energy about them, and it's not perfect, right? And we always tell them like nothing's going to be perfect. Like, some of you guys will be closer than others, but they have a respect for each other. And we constantly talk about that. Like, how do you talk to each other? How do you look at each other? Like, as women, what are you giving to each other? Right? Like, we have non-negotiables, and our first one is respect. And so we talked about that in recruiting. We talked about that when they came on campus in June. And so they know, you know, they know what that looks like. We have we will respect them. We won't talk down to them. We won't demean them. Like, and they can talk to us. And so when you have that open communication and you're showing them what it looks like, they can be that with each other. And then it allows them to connect in a different way. And so they kind of establish that. And then we do things off the floor together. Like, we go get meals together, but I meet them also where they are. So I go to their place, right? I check on them outside of my office, because, you know, coming into my office can seem like like they're in trouble again, right? And I don't want them to ever feel like they're in trouble when they come in my office, unless like I'm like,
unless they really are in trouble.
Right?
Hands on the head.
Right. Or if I'm sitting there like, you know, I've had those meetings, but I try to meet them in different places, right? I try to get them to see me outside of being their coach. Because, like, what's the thing you know about your coach? You're like, you're a coach. And like, that is it. Right? But I'm a mother. I bring my daughter around. My husband comes around. Like, they come to my house. And so I want them to see me as those things too.
Breaking it down on the court for us a little bit, what would you say the identity of this team is right now and what we're going to see from this UMKC team this season?
I think we have a mix. So we have a mix of freshmen, fresh, like chickens with their hairs cut off, right? Like, they're going to play hard just because, you know, that's all they really know. And then we have, we just have some players that can go get it. Man, they can go get it. And they may not know a play, but they can go get a bucket. And then we have those graduate students who have been here before. They've been at the Division I level, right? So we have a unique situation where we have a lot of balance, but our identity is always going to be defense. Like, we are going to compete and we're going to defend if we don't know how to do anything else. And so I want, like, any opponent that comes up against us, be like, man, they're going to compete. So you better be in. You're going to be in for a fight. Be ready for that fight. So that's kind of what we think our identity is going to be.
When you look, we know how difficult and how challenging the Summit League is from top to bottom, and it's a grind. Once you hit that time, you're going to have the Summit League and the Big Sky Challenge as well. When you looked at your non-conference opportunities, I know you've got Bradley early, right out of the gate, November 6th. You're going to play Kansas at Municipal, sort of on a neutral court in Kansas City. How did you approach non-conference scheduling, and what do you want to see early out of the group?
What I would like to see early is that they compete no matter who is in front of them, right? It's not really about who you play, but it's about you and how you can improve every day. And so we played Bradley. We played them last year. We're playing them again, but I want us to I want them to play free. I want to see, like, what are you like in a game situation, right? Now, I don't want it to be crazy, right? But I want to see, like, when everything comes down to it, can you put what you've learned, what we've spent months on top of months preparing for, can you put that into game situation? So that's what I would like to see against Bradley. When we come up against KU, I mean, it's KU. They won the WNIC last year. Like, they're a good team, well coached. I want to see who's going to compete, who doesn't care.
Yeah.
Like, I don't care because you're KU. I don't care because you're in the Big 12. I don't care because you're Power 5. I play basketball too. I put my pants on just like you do. I tie my shoes up just like you. I want to see, who do we have that's going to live in that space.
Coach, before we wrap things up with you, I want to hear what success looked like for you in year 2.
I've been asked this question already.
Well, you're already prepared.
She's got it down.
Yeah.
Success. Like, I mean, every AD wants you to say, like, wins. Like, I want to double my wins. And, like, yes, that is success, right? Can we do what we did last year in the tournament? Absolutely. But what success looks like for me is if our team is competing day in and day out, like, not waiting until we get into this tournament to compete. So are we building each day competitive? I want people to be like, we have no idea, about Kansas City. I mean, we're picked 9, which is cool, like, because nobody knows. But success for me is, does that translate for our team? Does that competitiveness translate into wins for us? And so I think, like, once I see that from them, I think the wins will take care of itself. But can we compete every day?
Before we go real fast, we had a discussion up here. We have 2 of the 3 of us are KC girls. So we have to ask the favorite spots to eat in KC.
So you guys are going to be so disappointed. But,
oh, no.
Like, I don't eat meat.
Okay.
So
okay.
No barbecue.
It's all right.
No barbecue.
Okay.
That's okay.
But I don't know. I mean, I do Jack Stack. They have this salmon. Oh my God, it's so good.
Yeah.
And it's just so many places in KC to eat. Like, it's crazy. You know what? Blue Sushi Grill. Oh my goodness. Amazing.
Yep.
That's a plug for them.
Yeah.
Well, there we go.
Amazing.
We got one of those in Omaha too.
We do have
so
one.
I know what you're saying.
It is
good.
amazing. I like the place. The vibe is good too. So.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Had to ask, KC at heart. So.
We get it, guys. I'm not from KC.
It's okay.
Right.
You got to know. Everyone has something that they like and they don't.
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
It's perfect.
Well, Coach, thank you so much for the
Thank you,
time.
guys.
Best
I
of luck this
appreciate it.
season. We'll have Dominique Phillips up next. We'll
Yeah.
take a short break.
We love Dom.
Thanks, Coach.